In the cold depths of space, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a universal truth that every species learns: extinction is final. When a world burns, when a people vanish into the void, they do not return. The galaxy had mourned humanity once, carved their name into the great memorial crystals of Endorian Prime, and filed their achievements away in the archives of the lost. That was 300 years ago. 3 centuries since the Zephyrian Collective's war fleets turned Earth into a glowing ember. 300 years since the last human distress signal faded into static. The galaxy moved on, as it always does, cataloging humanity as another footnote in the endless scroll of civilizations that reach too far, too fast. But the galaxy forgot something important about humans. Something that made them different from every other species that had ever lived and died among the stars. Humans don't just survive, they adapt. They endure. And when cornered, when faced with extinction itself, they do something that no other species has ever managed. They get angry. And an angry human, even one presumed dead, is the most dangerous force in the universe. The galaxy is about to learn that lesson the hard way. Commander Zixtal of the Galactic Survey Corps had seen many things in his 40-year career among the stars. He had witnessed the birth of new worlds, the collapse of ancient empires, and the discovery of ruins so old that their creators had been forgotten before most current civilizations had even evolved. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what his deep space sensor array was showing him now. The readings were impossible. His ship, the exploration vessel, Quantum Dawn, had been conducting a routine survey of the Outer Rim territories when the sensors detected something that shouldn't exist. According to every database in the galactic network, this sector of space was empty. It had been empty for 3 centuries, ever since the Zephyrian Collective had reduced the third planet of this system to molten slag, Earth, the humans' homeworld. The graveyard of a species that had dared to challenge the established order of the galaxy. But the sensors were detecting massive energy signatures, not just 1 or 2, but dozens of them. Signatures that spoke of advanced technology, of thriving civilization, of life where there should only be death and cosmic dust. "Run the scans again," Zixtal commanded, his forearms working the controls with practiced efficiency. His insectoid features remained impassive, but inside, his mind raced with possibilities. Equipment malfunction seemed most likely. The alternative was unthinkable. His navigation officer, a young Thessarian named Quinda, looked up from her station with confusion written across her pale blue features. "Commander, the readings are consistent. Multiple technological signatures across the entire system. And sir?" She paused, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Some of these energy patterns match old human designs from the archives." Zixtal felt a chill run down his chitinous spine. The humans had been extinct for 300 years. He had studied their history in the academy, had read the reports of their final days when the Zephyrian war machine had swept through their space like a plague. They had been remarkable for a primitive species, innovative, aggressive, adaptable, but ultimately outmatched. The Zephyrians had made sure of that. Every human world had been glassed, every ship destroyed, every trace of their civilization erased from the galaxy. Or so everyone believed. "Take us closer," he ordered, ignoring the protests from his security chief. "But keep us at maximum sensor range. If there's even a chance that something survived the purge, the Galactic Council needs to know." As the Quantum Dawn approached the inner system, the true scope of what they were seeing began to unfold. Where Earth had once been a green and blue jewel hanging in space, there now existed something that defied explanation. The planet was still there, but it had been transformed beyond recognition. Instead of continents and oceans, the surface was covered in a vast network of gleaming structures that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Massive orbital platforms surrounded the world like artificial moons, connected by streams of energy that painted the space around Earth in brilliant ribbons of power. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. "Commander," Quinda's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm detecting ships. Lots of them. She struggled to find words. "They're everywhere." Zixtal looked at the tactical display and felt his world tilt. The space around Earth wasn't just occupied, It was crowded. Hundreds of vessels of unknown design moved in perfect formation around the planet and its orbital installations. Some were small, no bigger than fighters, but others were massive beyond belief. He could see vessels that dwarfed the largest Zephyrian dreadnoughts, their hulls gleaming with the same strange energy that covered the planet's surface. "Are they human designs?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. His tactical officer, a gruff Corvin named Thex, ran the ship profiles through every database they had. The results were both expected and terrifying. "Unknown configuration, sir. But the materials, the energy signatures, they're definitely derived from human technology. Evolved, somehow. Advanced far beyond anything they had 3 centuries ago." Zixtal stared at the display in growing horror. If humans had somehow survived the Zephyrian genocide, if they had been hidden here in their devastated system for 300 years, building and advancing while the galaxy forgot about them, the implications were staggering. The humans had been dangerous enough when they were primitive. What would they be capable of now? As if in answer to his question, the ship's communication array suddenly came alive. A signal was being broadcast from the Earth system. Not to them specifically, but to the entire galaxy. The computer translated the language automatically, though it took a moment for the systems to recognize the long-dead human tongue. When the translation came through, Zixtal wished it hadn't. To all civilizations of the galactic community, the voice was calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying in its quiet confidence. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen, speaking on behalf of the Terran Resurrection Fleet. We know you thought we were gone. We know you believed our story had ended 3 centuries ago when the Zephyrian Collective tried to wipe us from existence." The voice paused, and in that silence, Zixtal could hear the weight of centuries, the pain of loss, and something else. Something that made his blood run cold. "You were wrong." The tactical display suddenly lit up with new contacts. Ships were emerging from behind the moon, rising from the surfaces of asteroids, uncloaking from positions throughout the solar system. Not hundreds of vessels, thousands. An armada that had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. For 300 years we have watched. We have learned. We have grown stronger. The Zephyrians thought they had destroyed us, but they only taught us a valuable lesson about the nature of galactic politics. The strong survive and the weak are consumed. More ships appeared on the sensors. The tactical officer had stopped counting at 10,000 and was now simply staring at the display in shock. The human fleet was massive beyond comprehension, and every vessel radiated power signatures that suggested technology far in advance of anything the current galactic powers possessed. "We want the galaxy to understand something very important," Admiral Chen continued, her voice carrying across the void with crystalline clarity. "We are not the same species that you nearly drove to extinction. We are not the naive newcomers who believed that peace and cooperation could exist between civilizations. We have been forged in the fire of genocide, tempered by centuries of struggle, and we have emerged from the ashes stronger than you can possibly imagine." A new contact appeared on the sensors, this one larger than anything they had detected so far. It was emerging from behind Earth itself, a vessel so massive that it seemed to dwarf the planet. The ship's hull was black as space itself, but it pulsed with veins of energy that made it look alive. Predatory. The Zephyrian Collective believed they could erase us from history. They were the first to learn they were wrong. Their empire fell 8 months ago, though we suspect the news hasn't reached the Outer Rim yet. Their worlds now serve as monuments to a simple truth. Humans do not forgive, and humans do not forget. Zixtal's mind reeled. The Zephyrian Collective destroyed? The same empire that had dominated a quarter of the galaxy for over a millennium? It was impossible. The Zephyrians had possessed one of the most powerful military forces in known space, with technology that had remained unmatched for centuries. "We are broadcasting on all galactic frequencies to make our position clear," the Admiral's voice continued. "Humanity has returned to the galaxy, and we are not the same species you remember. We do not seek your friendship. We do not desire your approval. We do not require your permission to exist." The massive ship behind Earth was now fully visible, and Zixtal could see that it wasn't alone. More vessels of similar size were emerging from concealment, each one a testament to human engineering and human fury. What we do require is your attention, because starting tomorrow we begin our expansion into the territories that were once denied to us. We will reclaim what was ours, and we will take what we need to secure our future. Any civilization that stands in our way will learn what the Zephyrians learned, that humanity's capacity for war is exceeded only by humanity's capacity for survival. The transmission paused again, and when it resumed there was something different in the Admiral's voice, something that spoke of old pain and older anger. You taught us that peace was weakness. You showed us that mercy was folly. You demonstrated that, in this galaxy, only the strong deserve to live. Congratulations, we learned your lessons well. Perhaps too well. Zixtal's communications officer looked up from his station with terror in his eyes. Sir, we're receiving targeting locks from multiple human vessels. They know we're here. The survey vessel observing from the edge of our space belongs to the Galactic Survey Corps. Admiral Chen's voice came through their speakers directly now, no longer part of the general broadcast. Commander Zixtal, I presume. Your ship's energy signature is in our databases. How did they know his name? How did they have records of Galactic Survey Corps vessels? The implications were staggering. You will return to the Galactic Council and deliver our message personally. Tell them that humanity remembers every slight, every betrayal, every moment when they chose to look the other way while the Zephyrians prepared their genocide. Tell them that the age of human submission is over. The targeting locks intensified, and Zixtal could see weapon signatures powering up across dozens of human ships. Any one of them could vaporize his survey vessel without effort. Tell them that we are no longer asking for a place in this galaxy. We are taking one, and anyone who tries to stop us will join the Zephyrians in extinction. The locks suddenly disappeared and the human fleet began to move. Not toward them, but away, heading for the outer reaches of the solar system in formations that spoke of military precision and deadly purpose. You have 48 hours to deliver our message before we begin our expansion. Admiral Chen's final words echoed through the Quantum Dawn's bridge. After that, any military vessel found in our path will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The transmission ended, leaving Zixtal and his crew in stunned silence. Around them, the human armada continued to deploy, revealing more and more vessels, until the very space around Earth seemed to pulse with barely contained power. Zixtal stared at the tactical display, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. Humanity was alive. Not just alive, but transformed into something that made their previous incarnations seem like children playing at war. They had spent 3 centuries in hiding, building, and planning and preparing for this moment. And now they were ready to take their revenge on a galaxy that had abandoned them to die. Set course for Galactic Headquarters, he commanded, his voice hollow with shock. Maximum speed. The Council needs to know what's coming. As the Quantum Dawn turned away from the Earth system, Zixtal took one last look at the growing human fleet. He could see more ships emerging from hidden bases throughout the solar system, an endless stream of vessels that spoke of 3 centuries of careful preparation and burning hatred. The galaxy had thought humanity was gone. They had been wrong about that. But Zixtal suspected that was only the beginning of how wrong they had been. As he watched the human armada spread across the stars like a plague of vengeance, he realized that everything the galaxy thought it knew about human nature was about to be proven catastrophically incorrect. Humanity had returned, and they had not come in peace. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of Commander Zixtal's arrival at the capital world of Nexus Prime. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered in the great chamber that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, but never had the ancient hall felt quite so tense, quite so charged with barely contained fear. High Chancellor Vextar, a towering Andromedian whose crystalline features normally radiated calm authority, stood before the assembled delegates with something approaching panic in his multifaceted eyes. The holographic display behind him showed the tactical recordings from the Quantum Dawn, images that defied everything the galactic community had believed for 3 centuries. Honored representatives, Vextar's voice resonated through the chamber's translation matrix, reaching every delegate in their native tongue. What you are about to see challenges our understanding of recent galactic history. 6 hours ago, Commander Zixtal of the Survey Corps transmitted these recordings from the Sol system, what we have long considered the tomb of the human species. The lights dimmed, and the holographic display came to life. The assembled delegates watched in growing horror as the images unfolded. Ships beyond counting filled the space around Earth, vessels that dwarfed the largest dreadnoughts in the galactic fleets, orbital installations that pulsed with unknown energy signatures, and at the center of it all, a planet that had been transformed from a dead world into something that looked more like a massive weapon than a home. Councillor Thekvar of the Regelian Commonwealth, his tentacles writhing with agitation, was the first to speak. This must be some kind of elaborate deception. The humans were destroyed. I was there when we received the final reports from Zephyrian Command. Every human world was glassed, every ship destroyed. Their entire species was eliminated. That's what we all believed, Vextar replied grimly. But the evidence suggests otherwise. Computer analysis confirms that these vessels exhibit technology derived from human designs, though advanced far beyond anything they possessed during the Zephyrian War. Representative Kilnara of the Centauri Trade Federation stood, her amphibious features glistening under the chamber's lights. Advanced how? What are we looking at in terms of technological capabilities? Chief Military Analyst Krondus stepped forward, his massive Corvin frame making the podium seem small by comparison. Based on energy signature analysis, these vessels operate on principles we don't fully understand. Their power output exceeds our best estimates by factors of 10 to 20. Some of the larger ships show energy signatures equivalent to small stars. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Energy signatures equivalent to stars? It seemed impossible, yet the data was there for everyone to see. Furthermore, Krondus continued, his voice heavy with implications, preliminary analysis suggests these ships employ some form of exotic matter manipulation. Their hulls appear to be constructed from materials that shouldn't be able to exist under normal physics. They've somehow learned to violate the fundamental laws that govern matter and energy. Councillor Zeptos of the Hegemony Worlds leaned forward, his cybernetic implants glowing with increased activity as he processed the information. You're suggesting that in 300 years, the humans have developed technology that surpasses anything in our databases? That's impossible. No species has ever made that kind of advancement in such a short time. Unless, interrupted Dr. Yilsha, the Council's chief xenobiologist, we fundamentally misunderstood human nature from the beginning. Most species reach a technological plateau and remain there for millennia. We assumed humans would follow the same pattern. But what if they don't? What if human psychology is fundamentally different from every other sentient species we've encountered? High Chancellor Vextar activated another section of the recording, showing the moment when Admiral Chen's transmission had begun. The delegates listened in stunned silence as the human leader calmly announced humanity's return to galactic affairs. But it was what came after the recording that truly sent shockwaves through the chamber. 8 hours ago, Vextar announced, we received confirmation of Admiral Chen's claims. The Zephyrian Collective has indeed fallen. Their capital world of Zephyr Prime shows massive bombardment damage consistent with exotic energy weapons. Intelligence reports suggest their entire military hierarchy was eliminated in a coordinated strike that lasted less than 12 hours. The chamber erupted in chaos. The Zephyrian Collective had been one of the galaxy's major powers for over a millennium. Their military technology had been considered state-of-the-art, their fleets nearly unstoppable. The idea that they could be completely destroyed in half a day was beyond comprehension. How is this possible? Demanded Councillor Vexreen of the Outer Territories. The Zephyrians had over 10,000 warships, dozens of fortress worlds, defense networks that had stood for centuries. How could the humans, even with advanced technology, overcome that kind of military advantage? Military analyst Krondus pulled up tactical data from the Zephyrian systems. Based on the evidence we've gathered, it appears the humans didn't engage in conventional warfare. Instead, they seemed to target key infrastructure simultaneously across the entire collective. Power generation facilities, communication networks, military command centers, all destroyed in the opening minutes of their attack. That would require unprecedented coordination, observed Dr. Yilsha. The Zephyrian Collective spanned 17 star systems. To coordinate simultaneous strikes across such a vast area would require either massive fleet deployment or technology that allows for faster-than-light coordination. Or both, Krondus replied grimly. Sensor data from surviving Zephyrian installations suggests human ships appeared simultaneously in multiple systems, as if they had been lying in wait. But that's not possible. We would have detected such a massive fleet deployment. Unless, Vexstar thought to himself, human stealth technology had advanced to the point where they could hide entire armadas without detection. The implications were terrifying. Counselor Thekvar's tentacles had turned a pale shade of yellow, a sign of extreme distress among his species. What of the Zephyrian population? Surely the humans didn't commit genocide in return. Krondus consulted his data pad. Actually, that's one of the most puzzling aspects of the human attack. Despite the complete destruction of military assets, civilian casualties were remarkably low. It appears the humans went to great lengths to avoid harming non-combatants. Refugee ships were allowed to escape unmolested. Medical facilities were specifically targeted for preservation rather than destruction. This information sent another wave of confusion through the chamber. Genocidal revenge would have been understandable, even expected. But selective military targeting? That suggested a level of strategic thinking and moral restraint that seemed at odds with the idea of a species driven by centuries of hatred. Perhaps, suggested Dr. Yilsha, we've been approaching this entire situation from the wrong perspective. What if the humans aren't simply seeking revenge? What if they're playing a much more sophisticated game? High Chancellor Vexstar called for order as the debate threatened to spin out of control. The immediate question before us is not human psychology, but human capability. According to Admiral Chen's transmission, humanity intends to begin territorial expansion in less than 40 hours. We need to decide how the galactic community will respond. Representative Kilnara stood again, her voice carrying the weight of economic concerns. Has anyone considered the trade implications? The humans were remarkable innovators before their supposed extinction. If they've spent 3 centuries advancing their technology in isolation, they could revolutionize galactic commerce overnight. We should be thinking about negotiation, not confrontation. Negotiation with what? Snapped Counselor Zeftas. A species that just demonstrated they can eliminate one of our major powers in half a day? They're not interested in trade agreements. They're making demands backed by the most powerful military force any of us have ever seen. Military analyst Krondus brought up a new set of projections. If we're discussing military response options, the Council needs to understand the scope of what we're facing. Conservative estimates suggest the human fleet numbers in the tens of thousands of vessels, but that's just what they revealed to Commander Zixtal. Based on the industrial capacity we observed around Earth, they could have 10 times that many ships hidden in reserve. 10 times? Counselor Thekvar's voice was barely a whisper. That would make them larger than the rest of the galaxy's military forces combined. And that's assuming they haven't established similar installations in other systems. For all we know, they've been secretly colonizing worlds throughout the galaxy for centuries, building industrial bases and military installations while we believed they were extinct. Dr. Yilsha accessed her xenological databases, searching for any precedent for what they were witnessing. There is one historical parallel that might be relevant. The precursor species, the ones who built the ancient ruins we find throughout the galaxy. Archaeological evidence suggests they went through rapid technological advancement phases, developing capabilities that seem impossible by our current understanding. The precursors vanished millions of years ago, pointed out Counselor Vexrine. We don't know what happened to them. Maybe we do now, Dr. Yilsha replied quietly. Maybe they didn't vanish, maybe they just decided to hide until they were ready to reshape the galaxy according to their vision. The comparison sent a chill through the chamber. The precursors had been so technologically advanced that their ruins still contained mysteries that current galactic science couldn't explain. If humanity had somehow achieved similar capabilities, High Chancellor Vexstar made a decision that would echo through galactic history. I'm calling for an immediate vote on emergency measures. We have less than 36 hours to decide whether we attempt diplomatic contact or prepare for military response. What about evacuation of threatened systems? Asked Representative Kilnara. If the humans begin expanding into occupied territories, we could be looking at billions of refugees. Which systems are threatened? Councillor Zeftos demanded. Admiral Chen didn't specify their expansion targets. Krondeus pulled up a galactic map highlighting the regions around Sol's system. Based on historical human territorial claims and strategic considerations, they'll most likely target the Kepler and Vega sectors initially. Those regions contain several major trade routes and resource-rich systems. Those are also heavily populated areas, Dr. Yilshop observed. If the humans move into those territories, we could see conflicts involving dozens of species. Unless, Vexstar said slowly, we acknowledge their territorial claims and negotiate new boundaries. The chamber fell silent. The High Chancellor had just suggested something that would have been unthinkable hours earlier, ceding territory to a species that was supposed to be extinct. You're proposing we surrender systems to the humans without even attempting resistance? Councillor Zeftos's cybernetic implants flared with indignation. I'm proposing we face reality, Vextar replied firmly. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that far exceed our ability to counter militarily. They've destroyed the Zephyrian Collective in less than a day. They're offering us the choice between negotiation and conquest. I suggest we choose negotiation while we still can. Councillor Thekvar's tentacles had now turned completely white, indicating absolute terror. But if we give in to their demands now, what's to stop them from taking the entire galaxy? Today, they want the Kepler and Vega sectors. Tomorrow, they might demand the core worlds. Maybe, Vexstar acknowledged. Or maybe they have specific limited objectives that we can accommodate. But one thing is certain. If we try to fight them and fail, we won't get another chance to negotiate. The debate continued for hours, but the underlying reality was unavoidable. Humanity had returned to the galactic stage with capabilities that made resistance seem futile. The only question was whether the galaxy would adapt to this new reality or be reshaped by force. As the delegates argued, sensor stations throughout the galaxy began detecting new signatures. Human ships were moving beyond the Sol system, advancing toward the boundaries of what had once been their territory. The expansion had begun early, and Admiral Chen's 48-hour deadline suddenly seemed optimistic. High Chancellor Vexstar looked at the incoming reports and realized that the galaxy was about to learn a lesson that should have been obvious from the beginning. Humans didn't make idle threats. When they promised consequences, they delivered them with interest compounded over centuries of careful planning. The galactic community had thought humanity was gone. They had been wrong about that. But as Vexstar watched the tactical displays light up with advancing human fleets, he realized they had been wrong about something far more important. They had assumed that humanity's defeat had been permanent, that their story had ended with the Zephyrian bombardment of Earth, but they had failed to understand the most fundamental aspect of human nature, the absolute refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seemed absolute. Humanity hadn't been destroyed 3 centuries ago. They had simply been forced to evolve. And now the galaxy was about to discover what humanity had evolved into. Ambassador Lyra Vasquez had spent her entire diplomatic career preparing for moments like this, but nothing in her training had equipped her to negotiate with ghosts. As her ship, the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, approached the human fleet's forward position in the Kepler sector, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to have a conversation with representatives of a species that should not exist. The human fleet had arrived in Kepler space 18 hours ahead of their announced schedule, and their deployment had been nothing short of masterful. Instead of charging in with overwhelming force, they had positioned themselves at key strategic points throughout the system, effectively controlling all major shipping lanes and communication routes without firing a single shot. It was a demonstration of tactical brilliance that spoke of centuries of careful study and planning. Lyra studied the tactical reports one final time as her ship moved toward the designated meeting coordinates. The human fleet in Kepler space alone numbered over 2,000 vessels, ranging from sleek destroyers to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the galactic navies. But what struck her most was their formation. It wasn't aggressive or threatening, but it was absolutely unbreakable. Anyone wanting to enter or leave the system would have to do so with human permission. "Ambassador," called Captain Rennis from the bridge, his Thessarian features showing the strain of the past day's events. We're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. They're requesting permission to board. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. The humans wanted to conduct negotiations aboard her ship. That was either a sign of remarkable confidence or an indication that they had capabilities she hadn't considered. Either way, it suggested that the humans were operating from a position of such strength that they felt no need for the usual diplomatic protocols. Grant permission, she decided, but maintain full security protocols. I want every sensor recording and a direct link to Galactic Command throughout the negotiations. 20 minutes later, Lyra stood in her ship's main conference room, waiting for her first face-to-face encounter with a living human in over 3 centuries. The door slid open, and she found herself looking at something she had only seen in historical archives. The human who entered was tall and lean, with dark skin and gray hair that spoke of decades of experience. He wore a uniform that was clearly military in nature, but unlike anything in the historical databases. The material seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, and Lyra's enhanced senses detected energy patterns that suggested the garment was more than mere clothing. It was some kind of sophisticated technology disguised as fabric. "Ambassador Vasquez," the human said, his voice carrying an accent that the translation software identified as North American English. "I am Admiral Marcus Rodriguez, representing the Terran Resurrection Command. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Lyra had to remind herself to breathe. She was looking at a living human, a member of a species that had been mourned, studied, and filed away as extinct. But there was something in Admiral Rodriguez's eyes that made her realize immediately that whatever humans had been 3 centuries ago, this man represented something far more dangerous. "Admiral Rodriguez," she managed, gesturing to the conference table. "I must admit this is perhaps the most unusual diplomatic encounter in galactic history." Rodriguez smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Lyra's diplomatic instincts scream warnings. "Unusual circumstances call for unusual approaches, Ambassador. May I say that your reputation for fair dealing precedes you? We've studied your career with considerable interest." They had studied her career? How was that possible? The implications were staggering. The humans had been monitoring galactic politics for decades, possibly centuries, learning about key figures and developing detailed intelligence on galactic affairs. "Thank you," Lyra replied carefully. "Though I have to ask, how exactly does an extinct species conduct research on current galactic politics?" "Ah." Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, looking completely at ease despite being aboard an alien vessel surrounded by potentially hostile fleets. "That's one of the questions we'll need to address, isn't it? The galaxy's assumption about our extinction was premature." Lyra activated her recording devices and opened a secure channel to Galactic Command. Whatever was about to be discussed, the Council needed to hear it in real time. "Admiral, I've been authorized to discuss territorial arrangements and the peaceful resolution of the current crisis. But before we can proceed, I need to understand exactly what happened 300 years ago. The historical record clearly shows the destruction of Earth and all human colonies." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "The historical record shows what the Zephyrians wanted it to show. Yes, Earth was bombarded. Yes, our colonies were attacked. But the Zephyrians made a critical error in their understanding of human nature. They assumed that our homeworld represented the totality of our civilization." He activated a small device on his uniform, and a holographic display materialized above the conference table. Lyra found herself looking at images that rewrote everything she thought she knew about human space exploration. "What you're seeing are the deep space installations we established in the decades before the Zephyrian War. Hidden facilities in asteroid belts, mining operations in the outer reaches of systems, research stations in deep space. The Zephyrians knew about our major colonies, our trade routes, our obvious military installations. They never suspected that we had been quietly expanding into regions they considered worthless or inaccessible." The implications hit Lyra like a physical blow. The humans hadn't been destroyed. They had been prepared for exactly the kind of genocide the Zephyrians had attempted. They had hidden their true population and industrial capacity in places no one thought to look. "How many?" she whispered. "By the time the Zephyrians attacked our homeworld, we had already evacuated over 2 billion humans to deep space facilities. Not all of them, unfortunately. Not nearly enough. but sufficient to ensure our survival and eventual return. 2 billion survivors. Lyra tried to process the number. The galactic databases indicated that Earth's population at the time of its destruction had been approximately 8 billion. The humans had saved a quarter of their species through sheer foresight and planning, but that still doesn't explain your technological advancement, she said. Even with survivors, how did you develop capabilities that surpass anything in galactic space? Rodriguez's smile turned predatory. That, Ambassador, is where human nature becomes relevant. Most species view technology as something to be discovered gradually, built upon slowly, advanced in careful increments. Humans view technology as a weapon to be forged in the fires of necessity. The holographic display changed, showing images of the hidden human facilities as they had evolved over 3 centuries. Lyra watched in fascination and growing terror as asteroid mining operations became massive industrial complexes, as research stations grew into technological development centers that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. We had something most species lack when they face extinction: absolute motivation. Every human survivor knew exactly what we were building toward. Every advance in technology brought us closer to the day we could ensure that nothing like the Zephyrian genocide could ever happen to us again. So you spent 3 centuries preparing for war? We spent 3 centuries preparing for survival, Rodriguez corrected. War was simply one of the tools we developed along the way, but we also developed art, philosophy, science, culture. We didn't just survive, Ambassador. We thrived. We became more than we had ever been before. Lyra accessed her cultural databases, trying to understand what Rodriguez was describing. Most species that faced near extinction became conservative, risk-averse, focused primarily on simple survival. But the humans seemed to have reacted in the opposite direction, becoming more innovative, more aggressive, more willing to push the boundaries of what was possible. Your attack on the Zephyrian collective, she said. Intelligence reports suggest you eliminated their entire military structure in less than 12 hours. How is that possible? The Zephyrians taught us something valuable about galactic warfare, Rodriguez replied. They showed us that if you're going to attack someone, you don't give them time to respond. You hit everywhere at once, you hit with overwhelming force, and you make sure that your first strike is your only strike. The tactical genius of it struck Lyra immediately. The humans had studied the Zephyrian attack methods, learned from them, and then improved upon them exponentially. They had turned the Zephyrians' own strategies against them with devastating effectiveness. But you spared the civilian population, she observed. That suggests restraint, possibly even mercy. For the first time, Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. We learned another lesson from the Zephyrians, Ambassador. Genocide is the tool of the weak, the desperate, and the evil. We're none of those things. We don't want to destroy other species. We want to ensure that they can never again threaten our existence. And your expansion into the Kepler and Vega sectors? What are your intentions regarding the current populations? Rodriguez deactivated the holographic display and leaned forward, his expression becoming completely serious. That depends entirely on whether those populations choose to cooperate or resist our presence. We're not interested in conquest for its own sake. We want strategic control over regions of space that can serve as buffer zones between human territory and potential threats. You're talking about creating an empire. We're talking about creating security. 3 centuries ago, humanity trusted in the good intentions of our galactic neighbors. We believed that civilization and diplomacy could protect us from aggression. We were wrong, and 8 billion of our people paid the price for our naivety. Lyra realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had been forged by trauma into something harder and more capable than they had ever been before. The humans weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They were survivors who had decided that the only way to ensure their survival was to become the strongest power in the galaxy. What do you want from the galactic community? She asked. Recognition, Rodriguez replied immediately. Recognition of our right to exist, to expand, to defend ourselves by any means necessary. Recognition that the age of human weakness is over, and that any species that threatens us will face consequences that make the fall of the Zephyrian collective look merciful. And if the galactic community refuses to grant that recognition? Rodriguez's smile returned, and this time there was nothing pleasant about it. Then the galactic community will learn what we learned 3 centuries ago. That in this universe the strong survive and the weak are consumed. The only difference is that we won't make the Zephyrians' mistake of offering anyone a second chance to threaten us. The conference room fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. Lyra realized that she wasn't negotiating with representatives of the species that had once sought peaceful coexistence with their galactic neighbors. These humans had been transformed by centuries of isolation and determination into something far more dangerous. "I need to understand your immediate territorial demands," she said finally. Rodriguez reactivated his device, and a new holographic display showed the Kepler and Vega sectors in detail. 15 systems in each sector chosen for strategic value and resource availability. Current populations will be relocated to systems outside human territorial claims with full compensation for any losses incurred. You're talking about displacing millions of beings. We're talking about giving them the chance to relocate peacefully, rather than be caught in the middle of a territorial dispute. It's more consideration than humanity was given 3 centuries ago. Lyra studied the proposed territorial boundaries and realized that the humans had chosen their targets with surgical precision. The systems they wanted controlled the major trade routes between the galaxy's core worlds and the outer rim territories. Anyone wanting to move goods or military assets through those regions would have to do so with human permission. "This gives you control over 40% of galactic commerce," she observed. "This gives us the ability to prevent any future coalition from isolating and destroying us the way the Zephyrians attempted. If the galaxy wants to trade, they'll trade through human space. If they want to build military alliances, they'll do so knowing that we're watching and prepared to respond." It was, Lyra realized, a masterpiece of strategic thinking. The humans weren't just taking territory. They were positioning themselves to control the economic and military flow of the entire galaxy. It was empire building on a scale that made the ancient precursor civilizations look modest by comparison. What guarantees can you offer that your expansion will end with these territorial demands? Rodriguez considered the question for a long moment before answering. None. Because expansion isn't our goal, ambassador security is. If the galaxy demonstrates that it can coexist peacefully with a strong human presence, then our territorial ambitions will remain limited to strategic necessities. But if the galaxy chooses to treat us as a threat, to be contained or eliminated, he left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. Humanity would continue expanding until they felt secure, and given what they had learned about galactic politics over the past 3 centuries, that might require them to control everything. Lyra closed the secure channel to Galactic Command, knowing that everything Rodriguez had said was being analyzed by the Council's best strategic minds. But she already knew what their conclusion would be. The humans held all the cards in this negotiation. They had the military strength to enforce their demands, the strategic position to control galactic commerce, and the historical justification to claim they were acting in self-defense. "I'll need to consult with the Galactic Council before I can respond to your proposals," she said. "You have 72 hours to provide an official response. After that, we begin implementing our territorial claims through whatever means prove necessary." As Rodriguez stood to leave, Lyra found herself compelled to ask one final question. "Admiral, do you think there's any hope for peaceful coexistence between humanity and the rest of the galaxy?" Rodriguez paused at the door, his expression becoming almost sad. "I hope so, Ambassador. I truly do. But hope isn't something we can afford to rely on anymore. 3 centuries ago, humanity hoped for peace and nearly faced extinction. This time, we're prepared for war and hoping that preparation will make war unnecessary." As the human delegation departed, Lyra stared out at the starfield beyond her ship's viewport. Somewhere out there, human fleets were taking positions around dozens of systems, preparing to reshape the galactic balance of power through sheer force of will and technological superiority. The galaxy had thought humanity was gone. They had been wrong, but as Lyra considered everything she had learned during the past hour, she realized that might have been the least of their mistakes. They had also thought they understood human nature, human capabilities, and human intentions. On all counts, they had been catastrophically wrong. Humanity had returned to claim their place among the stars, and they were no longer interested in asking permission. Fleet Admiral Kethtar of the Centauri Defense Force had commanded military operations across 3 sectors for over 2 decades, but he had never faced anything like the tactical nightmare unfolding before him. His orders from the Galactic Council had been clear: prevent human expansion into the Vega sector by any means necessary. What those orders hadn't mentioned was how exactly he was supposed to accomplish that goal, against an enemy that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of warfare. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought's stellar dominance, Kethtar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The human fleet had arrived in Vega space 6 hours earlier, and their deployment pattern defied every principle of military doctrine he had ever learned. Instead of taking defensive positions or preparing for conventional battle, they had scattered throughout the system in what appeared to be a completely random formation. It made no sense. Individual human ships were positioned near asteroid fields, gas giant moons, and deep space coordinates that seemed to have no strategic value whatsoever. Some vessels were stationed so far from any possible target that they couldn't provide support to other units even at faster-than-light speeds. It was either the work of complete amateurs or tactical genius so advanced that Kethtar couldn't recognize it. "Sir," called his tactical officer, Commander Yelanda, her voice tight with confusion. "The human fleet isn't responding to our presence at all. They're maintaining their scattered formation and ignoring our battle line completely." Kethtar looked at his own fleet's deployment. 2,000 of the galaxy's finest warships arranged in perfect battle formation, representing the combined military might of 12 different species. It was the largest galactic armada assembled in over a century, designed to demonstrate that the galaxy would not submit to human demands without a fight, and the humans were ignoring it completely. "Have they responded to our communications at all?" he asked. "Only to acknowledge our presence and request that we maintain a minimum distance of 50,000 kilometers from their vessels. No threats, no demands, no indication that they consider us hostile." That was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the entire situation. The humans were acting as if the largest military force ever assembled against them was merely an inconvenience to be worked around rather than a threat to be confronted. "Sir," another officer called from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Admiral Chen is requesting a direct communication link." Kethtar straightened his shoulders and activated the main view screen. A moment later, he found himself looking at a human female whose appearance matched the descriptions from historical databases, but whose presence seemed to fill the screen with quiet authority that made his battle-hardened crew unconsciously step back. "Fleet Admiral Kethtar," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying easily across the communication link. "I understand you've been ordered to prevent our expansion into this sector. I'm hoping we can discuss this situation before any unfortunate misunderstandings occur." Kethtar had rehearsed this moment for hours, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of negotiating with someone who seemed completely unconcerned by the overwhelming military force arrayed against her. "Admiral Chen," he replied formally, "by order of the Galactic Council, I am instructed to inform you that your presence in this sector constitutes an illegal territorial expansion. You are ordered to withdraw your forces immediately or face the consequences." Chen smiled, and somehow that expression was more intimidating than any threat could have been. "Fleet Admiral, I appreciate your dedication to duty, but I think there may be some confusion about the nature of our current situation. May I ask, what exactly do you believe those consequences might be?" The question caught Kethtar off guard. He had expected human arrogance, perhaps even aggression. He hadn't expected to be asked to explain the obvious. "If you don't withdraw, we will be forced to engage your fleet militarily," he said. "I see. And how exactly do you plan to accomplish that?" The casual tone of the question made Kethar's tactical instincts scream warnings. No commander faced with overwhelming odds should sound that confident unless they knew something their opponents didn't. "Admiral Chen, you have approximately 300 ships scattered throughout this system. I have 2,000 vessels in battle formation." The mathematics seem fairly straightforward. "Mathematics can be deceiving, Fleet Admiral. For instance, you're calculating based on the assumption that the ships you can see represent our total force in this system. You're also assuming that naval combat will follow conventional parameters. Both assumptions are incorrect. Kethar felt his blood run cold. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, Chen activated some kind of control on her command chair. Suddenly, Kethar's tactical displays began lighting up with new contacts. Ships were appearing throughout the system, not arriving from hyperspace but simply materializing as their stealth systems deactivated. Within moments, the human fleet had grown from 300 vessels to over 2,000, but that wasn't the most shocking development. The new ships that had revealed themselves were positioned in a pattern that Kethar now recognized with growing horror. Every one of his vessels was surrounded. The human fleet hadn't scattered randomly. They had deployed in a three-dimensional web that encompassed the entire galactic armada. Advanced stealth technology, Chen explained calmly. One of the many innovations we developed during our 3 centuries of isolation. Each of your ships is currently within weapons range of at least 3 human vessels. Your formation, while impressive from a traditional perspective, has become a target-rich environment for us. Kethar's tactical officer was frantically running calculations on her instruments. Sir, she whispered urgently, they're right. We're completely surrounded. If they open fire simultaneously, we'll lose at least 60% of our fleet in the first salvo. That's assuming they need to open fire at all, Admiral Chen continued. Commander Yelanda, may I call you by name? We've studied your tactical innovations with considerable interest. I'd like you to run a scan of your ship's primary power systems. Yelanda looked to Kethar for permission, confusion evident on her features. How did the humans know her name? How did they know about her tactical innovations? Kethar nodded grimly, and she began the requested scan. Sir, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I'm detecting anomalous readings throughout our power grid. It's as if something is interfacing directly with our systems. A computer virus? Kethar demanded. No, sir. It's more like our systems are being accessed from outside. But that's impossible. Our networks are completely isolated and protected by quantum encryption. Admiral Chen's image smiled again. Quantum encryption is indeed difficult to break, Commander. But it becomes much easier when you understand the underlying principles better than the people who created it. We've been monitoring your communications, your tactical planning, even your personal files, since the moment you entered this system. The implications hit Kethar like a physical blow. If the humans could access galactic computer systems at will, then every military secret, every tactical advantage, every strategic plan in the galactic databases was compromised. More importantly, Chen continued, we've developed something we call intrusive system architecture. Think of it as the logical evolution of computer warfare. Instead of simply attacking your systems, we integrate with them. Right now, we have complete control over your ship's life support, navigation, weapons, and communication systems. To demonstrate her point, the lights on the Stellar Dominance's bridge suddenly dimmed and then returned to normal. A moment later, the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated slightly before stabilizing. It was a gentle demonstration of power that made its point more effectively than any threat could have. You're telling me that you can control our entire fleet? Kethar asked, though he already knew the answer. We're telling you that we've evolved beyond the need for conventional warfare. Why destroy enemy ships when you can simply turn them off? Why engage in massive space battles when you can achieve the same strategic objectives through technological superiority? Kethar realized that everything he thought he knew about human capabilities had been based on 300-year-old intelligence. The species that had once relied on kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion had transformed themselves into something that operated on principles his civilization couldn't even comprehend. What do you want? He asked finally. The same thing we've always wanted, to be left alone to manage our own affairs. But since the galaxy seems incapable of allowing that, we want recognition of our territorial claims and assurance that we won't face another attempted genocide. And if we don't agree to your terms? Chen's expression became genuinely sad. Then we'll implement them anyway, but with considerably less consideration for galactic sensitivities. Fleet Admiral, we don't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to destroy other civilizations. We simply want to ensure that what happened to us 3 centuries ago never happens again. Kethtar studied the tactical displays, seeing his fleet surrounded and effectively neutralized without a shot being fired. The humans had demonstrated that they could have destroyed his entire armada at any time, but had chosen restraint instead. It was either mercy or a calculated display of superior power, and he suspected it was both. "What happens to my fleet if I agree to withdraw?" "You withdraw with full honors and without interference. Your ship's systems return to normal function, and we pretend this encounter never happened. You report to the Galactic Council that the human fleet was too well positioned to engage without unacceptable losses." It was, Kethtar realized, a face-saving gesture that would allow the galactic military to retreat without admitting they had been utterly outclassed. The humans could have humiliated them completely, but were choosing to offer a dignified exit. "And if I refuse, then we demonstrate that our restraint is a choice, not a limitation. Your ship's systems suffer cascading failures. Your crews are forced to abandon their vessels. Your fleet becomes a collection of drifting hulks that will eventually have to clean up. And you report to the Galactic Council that humanity has capabilities that make resistance impossible. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Kethtar could order an attack and watch his entire fleet die in minutes, or he could withdraw and preserve his crews for future conflicts that might actually be winnable. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked. "You've already decided, Fleet Admiral. You're too good a commander to sacrifice your crews for a symbolic gesture. The question is whether you want to withdraw now with your dignity intact, or whether you need us to provide a more dramatic demonstration of our capabilities." Kethtar looked around his bridge at officers who had served with him for years, beings who trusted him to make the right decisions for their safety and the safety of their crews. The mathematics of the situation were brutally clear. They had been outmaneuvered so completely that resistance would be not just futile, but actively suicidal. "Admiral Chen," he said formally, "the Galactic Defense Force acknowledges your position and will withdraw to allow for diplomatic resolution of this territorial dispute." "Thank you, Fleet Admiral. That was the right choice for everyone involved." As Kethtar gave the orders for withdrawal, he watched the human ships on his tactical display. They maintained their positions until his fleet had cleared the system, then simply faded from sensors as their stealth systems reactivated. Within minutes, it was as if the encounter had never happened, but Kethtar knew that everything had changed. The humans hadn't just demonstrated superior technology. They had shown that they had evolved beyond the need for traditional warfare. They could achieve their objectives through technological dominance that made military resistance pointless. As his fleet retreated through hyperspace, Kethtar composed his report to the Galactic Council. "How did you explain to civilian leadership that their most powerful military force had been neutralized without a single shot being fired? How did you convey that humanity had become something so far beyond current galactic capabilities that opposition was meaningless?" The answer, he realized, was that you didn't. You simply reported that the human fleet was too well positioned to engage without unacceptable losses, and you let the politicians draw their own conclusions about what that meant. But privately, Kethtar understood that he had just witnessed the end of one era in galactic history and the beginning of another. The humans had returned to claim their place among the stars, and they had done so with such overwhelming technological superiority that traditional concepts of warfare had become obsolete. The galaxy had thought humanity was gone. They had been wrong, but more importantly, they had thought they understood what war looked like in the modern era. They had been wrong about that too. Humanity had spent 3 centuries learning lessons that no other species had ever needed to learn. Now they were teaching those lessons to a galaxy that had no choice but to pay attention. The war for human territorial expansion was over before it had even begun, and somehow that was more terrifying than any conventional victory could have been. 1 year after humanity's return to galactic affairs, Ambassador Lyra Vasquez found herself standing in what had once been the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber remained architecturally unchanged, the same soaring crystalline walls, the same arrangement of delegation platforms, the same ceremonial lighting that had witnessed centuries of galactic politics. But the atmosphere was completely different. Where once there had been the comfortable certainty of established order, now there was the electric tension of a civilization coming to terms with a fundamental shift in the balance of power. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their designated areas, but their attention was focused not on the traditional podium where galactic business had always been conducted, but on a new addition to the chamber. The human delegation platform occupied a position that had been hastily constructed after the territorial agreements had been finalized. It wasn't larger than the other platforms, but its placement, at the geometric center of the chamber's curved design, made it impossible to ignore. From that position, the human representative could see every other delegation, and more importantly, every other delegation was forced to acknowledge the human presence simply by participating in council sessions. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the podium that had been built into the platform, reviewing notes for what would become one of the most significant speeches in galactic history. She had traded her military uniform for civilian diplomatic attire, but no amount of formal wear could disguise the fact that she remained every inch the commander who had orchestrated humanity's return to power. "Honored representatives," Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic system. "1 year ago, I addressed this body through a transmission that many of you believed was impossible. Today, I stand before you as the official representative of the Terran Resurrection Government, and I want to discuss the progress we've made together in reshaping galactic relations." Lyra, now serving as the Council's senior diplomatic advisor, watched the faces of the various delegates as Chen spoke. The expressions ranged from grudging respect to barely concealed fear, with very few showing anything approaching genuine comfort with the new status quo. "The territorial integration process has proceeded more smoothly than anyone anticipated," Chen continued. "The voluntary relocation of existing populations from the Kepler and Vega sectors was completed 6 months ago, with full compensation provided as promised. I'm pleased to report that refugee integration into their new systems has been successful, with unemployment rates below 2% and infrastructure development ahead of schedule. It was true, though the success of the relocation process had less to do with human generosity than with human efficiency. The technology demonstrations during the resettlement process had made it clear that cooperation with human directives was not just advisable, it was the only practical option. When humans could terraforming planets in months rather than decades, when they could establish complete industrial infrastructure faster than traditional civilizations could plan it, resistance became not just futile but counterproductive. More significantly, Chen said, the new trade arrangements have resulted in unprecedented economic growth throughout the participating systems. Galactic commerce through human-controlled space has increased by 47%, while shipping times have been reduced by 62%, thanks to improvements in space lane management and cargo handling technology. High Chancellor Vexstar, who had managed to retain his position despite the massive changes in galactic governance, leaned forward from his platform. Admiral Chen, while the economic benefits of human territorial control are undeniable, many council members remain concerned about the exclusivity of human technology sharing. It was a diplomatic way of addressing what everyone in the chamber knew but few were willing to say directly. The humans had revolutionized galactic commerce and industry through the selective application of their advanced technology, but they had shown no inclination to share the underlying principles with their galactic neighbors. Every improvement, every innovation, every advancement remained under exclusive human control. Chen smiled, and Lyra noticed that the expression had lost some of its predatory edge over the past year. Either the Admiral had grown more comfortable with her diplomatic role, or she had simply become better at disguising her thoughts. High Chancellor, the question of technology sharing is indeed complex. As I'm sure you understand, the same innovations that have improved galactic commerce could also be weaponized if they fell into the wrong hands. Our approach has been to provide technological benefits through controlled implementation rather than unrestricted distribution. Which means, interjected Councillor Thekvar of the Regelian Commonwealth, that the galaxy has become dependent on human goodwill for continued economic prosperity. The galaxy has become integrated into a more efficient system, Chen corrected, one that benefits everyone involved. Though I do understand your concern about dependency. After all, humanity spent several millennia being dependent on galactic goodwill. We learned some valuable lessons about how that arrangement can be terminated without warning. The reminder sent a chill through the chamber. No one wanted to discuss the events of 3 centuries ago directly, but they formed the context for every interaction between humanity and the rest of the galactic community. Representative Kilnara of the Centauri Trade Federation stood up from her platform. Admiral Chen, there have been reports of human expansion beyond the agreed territorial boundaries. Exploration vessels have detected human installations in systems that were not part of the original accords. Chen nodded as if she had been expecting the question. Representative Kilnara, you're referring to our deep space research facilities. These installations are not territorial claims in the traditional sense. They're scientific and industrial development centers located in previously unoccupied systems. Previously unoccupied systems that happen to be strategically positioned along major hyperspace routes, observed military analyst Krondas from the Council's Tactical Advisory Platform. Strategically positioned, yes, Chen acknowledged, but also resource-rich and scientifically interesting. Humanity has learned the importance of maintaining multiple bases of operation. We won't again make the mistake of concentrating our civilization in easily targeted locations. Lyra realized that this was the closest thing to a direct explanation of human strategic doctrine that had been offered since their return. The humans weren't just expanding for expansion's sake, they were creating a civilization that could never again be eliminated through conventional military action. Every installation, every base, every research facility was positioned not just for its immediate value, but as part of a larger network that would ensure human survival regardless of what happened to any individual component. That raises an important question, said Dr. Yulsha from the Xenobiological Research Platform. What are humanity's long-term intentions regarding galactic expansion? Are we looking at a gradual process of human territorial growth, or will expansion cease at some predetermined point? Chen was quiet for a long moment, and Lyra could see her considering how much to reveal about human planning. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of carefully considered policy. Yilsha, humanity's expansion will continue until we achieve what we call strategic security, the point at which our civilization cannot be threatened by any conceivable coalition of galactic powers. Whether that requires control of 10 systems or 10,000 systems depends largely on how the galaxy chooses to respond to our presence. The implication was crystal clear. The humans would keep expanding until they felt safe, and their definition of safety seemed to require capabilities that exceeded anything the rest of the galaxy could muster. It was empire building disguised as self-defense, but the disguise was so thin as to be almost insulting. And what about species that don't wish to be integrated into this new order? Asked Counselor Zeftos of the Hegemony Worlds. What options exist for civilizations that prefer independence to human oversight? The same options that existed for humanity 3 centuries ago. Chen replied with devastating directness. Adaptation or extinction. The difference is that we're offering the choice voluntarily rather than having it imposed through military action. High Chancellor Vextar called for order as the chamber erupted in angry voices. Chen waited calmly for the noise to subside, seemingly unbothered by the hostility her words had generated. I understand that my statements are disturbing, she continued when quiet had been restored. But I prefer honesty to comfortable illusions. The galaxy has spent the past year learning to work with human capabilities rather than against them. The results have been prosperity, peace, and stability on a scale that hasn't been seen for centuries. It was true, though Lyra suspected that the peace had more to do with the impossibility of successful resistance than with genuine cooperation. The few species that had attempted to challenge human expansion had been dealt with so efficiently and completely that no one else had been willing to follow their example. The hegemony worlds, for instance, Chen said, looking directly at Counselor Zeftos, have seen their industrial output increase by 300% since agreeing to human technological integration. Their unemployment rate is effectively 0. Their infrastructure has been modernized to galactic standards, and their defensive capabilities have been enhanced beyond anything they could have achieved independently. At the cost of our autonomy, Zeftos replied bitterly. At the cost of your isolation, Chen corrected. The hegemony worlds are now part of a galactic community that shares resources, technology, and mutual defense obligations. You're more secure, more prosperous, and more connected to the broader galaxy than you've ever been before. Under human oversight, under human protection. There's a difference, though I understand why it might not feel that way from your perspective. Lyra found herself grudgingly impressed by Chen's diplomatic skills. The Admiral was managing to present human hegemony as a service provided to the galaxy rather than domination imposed upon it. Whether anyone actually believed that interpretation was another question entirely. Admiral Chen, Vextar said carefully, the Council appreciates the benefits that human technological integration has provided, but there are concerns about what happens if human interests and galactic interests diverge in the future. High Chancellor, human interests and galactic interests are now inseparable. We've made sure of that. When the galaxy prospers, humanity prospers. When the galaxy faces threats, those threats become human concerns as well. And when human expansion creates instability, then we address that instability through the same methods we've used to address every other challenge. Superior technology, strategic planning, and the absolute determination to ensure our survival. Dr. Yilsha leaned forward from her platform. Admiral, there's something I need to ask directly. Are we witnessing the emergence of a human empire, or are we seeing the integration of humanity into an existing galactic community? Chen considered the question for several moments before answering. Dr. Ilsha, I think we're witnessing the evolution of galactic civilization itself. For millennia, this community has been held together by common economic interests and mutual defense agreements that ultimately proved inadequate when tested by serious conflict. What we're building now is more stable, more efficient, and more capable of responding to existential threats. More stable because it's controlled by a single species. More stable because it's organized according to principles that work. Democracy is a luxury that civilizations can afford only when they're not facing extinction. When survival is at stake, you need leadership that can make difficult decisions quickly and implement them effectively. Lyra realized that Chen had just provided the most honest explanation of human intentions that had been offered since their return. The humans weren't interested in democracy, equality, or traditional galactic governance. They wanted efficiency, security, and control, and they were powerful enough to impose those priorities on everyone else. What about species that haven't yet been contacted by human expansion? Asked Representative Kilnara. Do they have any choice in whether to join this new order? The same choice everyone has: cooperation or consequences. But I'd point out that every species that has chosen cooperation has benefited enormously from that decision. We're not conquerors seeking to exploit subject populations. We're organizers seeking to build a galactic community that actually works. As the session continued, Lyra found herself thinking about the galaxy as it had existed before humanity's return. There had been constant low-level conflicts, economic inefficiencies, technological stagnation, and political paralysis that had made effective governance nearly impossible. The human system wasn't democratic, but it was undeniably effective. The question that haunted her was whether effectiveness was worth the cost of freedom. The humans offered prosperity, security, and stability, but only under their terms, according to their vision, and subject to their continued goodwill. Admiral Chen, she said when the formal questioning period ended, may I ask a personal question? Of course, Ambassador. Do you believe that humanity's current path will ultimately benefit the galaxy, or are you simply ensuring human survival regardless of the consequences for other species? Chen smiled again, and this time the expression seemed genuinely thoughtful rather than diplomatic. Ambassador Vasquez, I believe that a galaxy organized according to human principles will be more peaceful, more prosperous, and more stable than anything that has existed before. Whether that constitutes a benefit or a loss depends on how much value you place on inefficient democracy versus effective governance. And if you're wrong, if human hegemony ultimately proves as flawed as every other system of government in galactic history, then we'll adapt the same way we've adapted to every other challenge we've faced. But I'd point out that humanity has a track record of learning from mistakes that most species lack. We've experienced conquest, near extinction, and exile. We know what happens when civilizations become complacent or divided. As the session concluded and the various delegates began filing out of the chamber, Lyra remained in her seat, watching Chen organize her materials. The human admiral had transformed from a military commander into a diplomat, from a survivor into an architect of galactic governance. The galaxy had thought humanity was gone. They had been wrong about that. But as Lyra considered everything she had learned over the past year, she realized they had been wrong about something even more fundamental. They had assumed that humanity's return would mean a return to the old patterns of galactic politics, competition between species, negotiation between equals, and compromise based on mutual weakness. Instead, humanity had created something entirely new, a galactic order based on technological superiority and the absolute determination never again to be vulnerable to extinction. Whether that new order represented evolution or devolution, progress or tyranny, remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The galaxy had been fundamentally transformed by the return of a species that refused to accept the limitations that had defined galactic civilization for millennia. Humanity was back, and they had brought the future with them. Whether the rest of the galaxy would learn to thrive in that future or simply survive, it was the question that would define the next chapter of galactic history. The age of human weakness was over. The age of human dominance had begun.